All right, guys. So for tonight, what I'm gonna do, as the kids finally go to bed, I would have done a video earlier, but it gets kind of noisy. All the kids are back. Everything's back to how it was, minus my son being up in Kelowna, but onwards and upwards and forwards and not backwards. Um, so I did a reading from one of my books about rivals, and in this case, I'm talking about hockey history. So tonight, Papa Hockey Guy we'll be reading once again. So go ahead and get settled. Settle down in your bed with your laptop or your phone, and allow me to read you a bedtime story. Today, unless it's not bedtime when you're watching this, in which case this is just me going through the live puck era, because a lot of people who watch this weren't around during the live puck era, which was an amazing time for hockey if you liked goals. It's sort of like for baseball fans who really liked when all those home runs were getting hit. I didn't. When McGuire and Sosa and all them were hitting all those home runs, I stopped watching baseball. I was like, this is crap. I'd watch every game. It was like 12-8, 13-9, and I just didn't care. So tonight we get into the live puck era, an era which featured Wayne Gretzky, Mike Bossy, Yari Curry, and many more. What are you laughing at over there?
Nothing.
I'm trying
Continue.
to set things up and
Yes, I know.
set the mood.
Just ignore me. Continue.
Can't ignore you. We haven't been married that long. More money,
I'll get better at it.
more teams, more scoring, and more broken records. That was the mantra of the game's gloriously gluttonous age. The point is, ladies and gentlemen, that greed, for lack of a better word, is good. Greed is right, greed works, greed clarifies, cuts through, and captures the essence of the evolutionary spirit. Greed in all its forms, greed for life, for money, for love, knowledge, has marked the upward surge of mankind. Gordon Gekko, as played by Michael Douglas in Wall Street. Whether it was on the ice or in the boardroom, the NHL from 1979 through the early 90s was all about greed, pushing boundaries and excess. But the thirst for advancement at all costs wasn't only to be found in the sport's greatest league. It was everywhere. In the United States, Americans went from single-term Democrat-Republican Jimmy Carter's humanistic reproach to two terms of Republican Ronald Reagan's business-first mentality. Canada took a little longer to follow that route, but sure enough, Canadians eschewed the bleeding-heart Liberal Party of legendary Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau in favor of the conservative free trade-pushing mandate of Brian Mulroney. And it was there in hockey. It was there in NHL's victory over the rival World Hockey Association. For 7 years, beginning in 1972, the WHA competed with the NHL for star players, including all-time greats Gordie Howe and Bobby Hull, among others. But by 1979, it had folded, and four of its teams, the Oilers, Whalers, Jets, and Nordiques, were assimilated into what became a 21-team NHL, which to me was the best NHL. Much like for the generation that preceded mine, the original six was the best NHL. Much like you guys are going to wax philosophical someday about, man, before Vegas came in, the league was so much better. It's just the way it works. The late 70s expansion of the NHL brought with it a slew of WHA-raised talent, including Mark Messier and Wayne Gretzky. Gretzky, that wasn't really raised WHA. Gretzky was setting scoring records way before he turned professional. Everybody knew he was going to be special. The lineups of the Oilers did that, converting an incredible lineup, including Paul Coffey, Yari Curry, Glenn Anderson, and Grant Fuhr, into a dynasty. That's another element of greed to be found in this era. This was the last of the true dynasties, of teams who weren't satisfied with a single Stanley Cup victory and instead racked up multiple championships. In fact, from 1979 to 1993, just 5 teams won it all. The Islanders won it 4 straight years from 80 to 83. The Oilers won 5 of the next 7, 84, 85, 87, 88, and 90. Montreal won in 86 and 93. Pittsburgh won in 91, 92. And Calgary won in 1989. Thanks, Steve Smith. That sense of always wanting more also carried over to the style of play that developed in that period. Players were transitioning from a slower league where players often didn't get in shape until training camp to a more modern entity where that pace was much closer to what you'd see at a racetrack, and athletes began treating their bodies as elite business machines to be maintained on a year-round basis. And I discussed this when I talked about the game I saw a portion of at the Canucks store, which was a 70s game featuring Buffalo and Philly, and how they seemed slower and smaller, and you could see the difference. 80s hockey, you'll see those, they're slower than what you see now, but the disorganization led to a lot of scoring chances. When you only have your head coach, you don't have defensive coaches, you don't have special teams coaches, goaltending coaches. The head coach is basically just trying to outscore the other team. If you took all the assistant coaches out of the NHL and you took everything and you just had one head coach, scoring would go up. Scoring would go up quickly. It is really hard for one person to keep track of everything going on the ice and everybody on the ice. When you've got all these guys who are assigned different specialty jobs, scoring comes down. As they go, okay, that guy blew his assignments, this guy had a bad pass, this happened. When you're just one guy as the coach, it's hard to pick up all of it. So when people talk about scoring and how the game's different, that's a big part of it. All right. The results of that evolution showed on the ice as the league's goals per game average skyrocketed from 7 in 78-79, and right now we're around 5.5. So that's about a goal and a half more per game than what we see now, to 7.69 in 80-81, and a modern-day high of 8.03 the following season. The all-time high was 8.17, set in 43-44. In fact, in 12 years of that 14-year stretch, the league's goals per game average was above the 7.00 mark and has never returned to that level since. And it never will. I can't see it. So when I talk about increasing scoring, I'm thinking if the NHL called the rules the way they should, and if you found ways to encourage scoring, I think you could probably get to about 6.1 goals a game. I think that's probably about as high as you could get it. 6.1, anything more than that is highly unlikely. The goaltenders are bigger, all of the players are faster, they're in better shape. Like I said, there are so many coaches, which we didn't have back then. And Teemu Selanne said of his 76-goal rookie season in 92-93, the game was totally different when I started in the NHL. The biggest difference now is the attitude of the teams. Now teams say there's no way we're going to give up more than 2 or 3 goals in a game. In my time, it was whoever scores more goals wins. I always found that weird. I've always found that strange, that the obsession now is don't allow a goal rather than score more than the other team. Because simplistically, that's what you're supposed to do, is score more than the other team. And yet, when there's a team that's built that way, to score more than the other team, they're criticized for it. And I've always found it strange that, and I understand that in the playoffs, the team with the better defense will often win. But there were times in the 80s where the team with the better offense just overwhelmed the team with the better defense. I know it's hard. I'm not saying it's easy. The goal scoring will never get back to what it was. It's just one of those things that I find strange. It started with Montreal. Montreal was the first team that I saw really doing that regularly. Back to Bob Gainey and then Guy Carbonneau after. Those defensive forwards were loved. And the guys who prevented the goals from being scored were loved. And Patrick Roy came in at that time. Like, Montreal, while Jersey was the first trap team to win a Stanley Cup, Montreal started that trend of better defense. And then it became everybody saying, all right, well, we're not going to allow goals anymore. And all the blocked shots started coming in. The defensive systems you see that drive you guys nuts. A lot of people nuts. That's when they started. So what? Whereas the NHL features the NHL now features defensive stinginess, variations of the trap, and shot blocking galore. The NHL from 79 to 93 was about piling up offense as best you could. The game hadn't yet been micromanaged and overcoached as it is today. So there they are, saying basically what I was saying. It's all about getting yours and maximizing success wherever possible, whether you were a player or a team owner. After the 4 WHE teams were brought into the fold, the league realized there was more demand than ever for its product, so in 1990 it kicked off an era of unbridled expansion that led to the 30-team setup. Although many, if not most, of those business moves were met with widespread scorn by hockey diehards, it was clear the financial aspects of the game was overshadowing its humble roots, and there was no turning back. The sports consumer world of satellite TV, sports talk radio, and cable rights holder deals was growing exponentially. Inroads made in merchandising and memorabilia was also funneling more money into the pockets of owners and players. Of course, the NHLPA and its constituents would be wildly successful in that regard, perfectly capping off the era where greed was not only a good thing, it was a great thing, and the only thing. So there you go. And yeah, it's the game is just it's we talk about these replays. We talk about every single play. I see guys getting ripped to shreds for defensive miscues. And I think, wow, in the 80s, if we'd had all those cameras and if we'd had all of this scrutiny, Paul Coffey would have been driven into the ground. Coffey almost never played the point. He came in as a fourth forward. That's just how he played. He was a rover. That's why, he scored all kinds of points, but he was never seen as a Norris guy, really. Ray Bourque more than Coffey, but even by today's standards, yeah, Bourque took a lot of chances. So it was an era that I miss. I'm not going to lie, I miss it. And I do wish that there was a way to encourage offense, not penalize defense, but allow players to play more and find a way to make that work. So you guys can let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. And thank you so much for watching. You guys are awesome. This has been a great weekend. I think this is probably my last video for today. I know it's only my second. But we had a full day, and we saw Spider-Man, which was awesome. And I may do a review for that on my other channel. I'm not sure. I may. But it was great. Great. And so was the live puck era. So let me know your thoughts, and I'll talk to you guys again later.